Welcome, Bearcats and parents, back to Jackson Square. Today we're going to be looking at the mathematical properties or properties of math. So let's go ahead and jump right in, and we're going to start with the commutative property. So the commutative property says that I can move numbers around in addition or in multiplication and the answer won't change. So if I move the numbers, I physically move the numbers around in the commutative property, the numbers are going to physically move around. So it will go from being 11 plus 2 to 2 plus 11. All the numbers did were switch places. That is what the commutative property says. The numbers can move around and the answer won't change. That is additive and multiplicative. Our next property we want to look at is the associative property. Associative property is all about the groupings, who you're hanging out with, who your friends are, who's your squad, who's your clique, who's your posse, whatever the word is, who you are hanging out with. So in the associative property, the numbers don't physically move. The parentheses moves. The grouping changes. So who you're hanging out with changes. So my problem could go from 2 plus 5 plus 7 to now being 2 plus 5 plus 7 being grouped. So the grouping changed. My parentheses shifted from the left to the right. At first, 2 was hanging out with 5, and now, if you look over here, 5 is hanging out with 7. So the grouping has changed. It's gone from 2 and 5 being together hanging out to now 5 and 7 are together hanging out. The numbers are in the same order, 2, 5, 7, 2, 5, 7. The numbers don't move. In associative properties, the parentheses moves, not the numbers. Next, we look at identity property. Identity property is additive and multiplicative as well. Identity property says no matter what you add to me or what you multiply me by, if you multiply me by this number, my identity doesn't change. I'm still myself. So the identity property says if I add 0 to a number, the number's identity doesn't change. 3 plus 0 is still 3. The man in the mirror hasn't changed. If I multiply a number by 1, it doesn't change that number's identity. 3 times 1, I'm still 3. My identity hasn't changed. So the identity property for addition or multiplication says if you add 0 to me, I'm still 3. If you multiply me by 1, I'm still the same man in the mirror. Next, we have our inverse property. Inverse property for addition and for multiplication. Inverse property has to do with being the opposite. That's why I picked a roll of film for my visual for this, because on a roll of film, if you remember film, those who are old enough to remember it, you see the inverse. The colors are inverted on the negative. Everything looks different from when you actually took the picture. The colors are all opposites. So the inverse property, the additive inverse property says that if you add my opposite to me, I will be 0. So 3 plus negative 3 is going to be 0 because 3 and negative 3 are opposites. They are the inverse of each other. You're going to get 0. The multiplicative version says if you multiply me by my reciprocal, you're going to get 1. So the reciprocal of 3 would be 1/3. Or the reciprocal of 3 over 1 is 1 over 3. So if I multiply 3 by its opposite or its inverse, I'm going to get 1. So the inverse property says add me to my opposite, you get 0. Multiply me by my reciprocal, you get 1. Then we have the distributive property. Distributive property, everybody gets some. Every day we distribute papers in the classroom. Sometimes when you're doing a good job, I'm distributing candy. When you distribute, everybody in the parentheses gets some. Distributive property is only for multiplication. It only works with multiplication. So distributive properties can look like this. And when I say everyone gets some, everybody in parentheses is going to be in contact with this 2 on the outside. And again, a number next to parentheses means you're going to multiply. So I'm going to take this 2 and distribute it. Give it out. Distribute means to give out. So it becomes 2 times 5x plus 2 times 3. Then we're going to move further along, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how we combine these together. So then I will go ahead and multiply. 2 times 5 will give me 10x, and 2 times 3 will give me 6. So distributive property, again, everybody gets some. So you're going to give everybody a little piece of candy. Everybody's going to get some paper. Everybody gets some. Distribute that number inside the parentheses to everyone. And last but certainly not least is our zero property. Our zero property says 0 is my hero. 0 is my hero. 0 is a powerful number. If you multiply anything times 0, you're going to get 0. So the zero product property, again, we can tell by the word property that it is only dealing with multiplication. The zero product property says anytime you multiply a number times 0, you're going to get 0. So these are our mathematical properties. And we're going to jump right into our assignment for the night and see if we can apply these properties. So let's see if we can remember. 11 plus 0 equals 11. 11 plus 0 equals 11. So 11 plus 0 sounds like my identity did not change. My identity did not change. So if I add 0 to a number, I'm still going to be 0. So this is our identity property, and it's going to be a additive identity property. So we're going to say E because this is addition. Let's look at this one. X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. So the letters didn't change order. They're in the same order, but Y is hanging out with Z, and then Y is hanging out with X. So this is a grouping change. This is a grouping. The groups change. The people who are hanging out together change. And this is multiplication, so it's going to be a multiplicative property, associative property of multiplication, D. It's multiplicative. D. Let's look at 4. 14 plus 20 is equal to 20 plus 14. Oh, we know when that one is, right? That one is commutative. Commutative property. That 14 went from being at the front of the line to now is at the back of the line. The 14 moved, and it's addition, so it's going to be commutative property of addition. A. Commutative property. The next one, 2 times 1/2 equals 1. 2 times 1/2. It's multiplicative. And 1/2 is the reciprocal. This is the reciprocal of 2. So this is going to be an inverse property. We're doing the opposite. I'm multiplying it times the opposite. So which one of these? Multiplicative inverse. This is going to be I. And last but certainly not least, what do we have here? We have 7 times the quantity of 4 and 11 is equal to 7 times 4 plus 7 times 11. Excuse me. We just did this one. This is going to be our distributive property. Distribute. Everybody is getting some. That 7 is being distributed to everyone inside parentheses. Distributive property. So where's distributive property? G. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this has been helpful to someone. And remember, good luck, Bearcats.